Hello, everyone. I'm Kaushik. I lead Climate Asia's accelerator programs. Climate Asia is a platform that creates a lot of knowledge and output for people looking for transitioning into the climate ecosystem. We try to bridge the capacity gap and talent gap in the climate ecosystem, and we work with a lot of grassroots institutions that are working on the ground in climate adaptation and resilience. So this is another conversation as part of our series of conversations of change, where we invite a lot of different important people working in the climate action space across the world. And for the today's conversation of change, we have a special person joining us from all the way across the globe, from where we are sitting, Brandon Levy, the Chief Program Officer of the Sustainable Ocean Alliance. Welcome, Brandon.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be joining you here from New York, in a very different time zone than you are, but still the ocean is universal. So it transcends time zones, as we'll talk about.
That's right. Thanks for joining, Brandon. Must be really early for you. So before we start the conversation, I would love to just read through your bio to let our audience know who we are speaking with. Brandon works, like I mentioned, works as a Chief Program Officer of the Sustainable Ocean Alliance, and his intention is to be the guiding light that inspires humanity to heal the planet by healing themselves. Through his endeavors as a program designer, public speaker, meditation teacher, and mentor, he has helped hundreds of young leaders and social entrepreneurs navigate the intertwined imperatives of self-actualization and ecological regeneration. In his tenure at Sustainable Ocean Alliance, Brandon has carried his mission forth by supporting the next generation of ocean innovators with the training, resources, and networks they need to build nature-positive solutions and reach their full potential as human beings. In this capacity, Brandon has built the Ocean Leadership Program, created a grant program that has funded grassroots projects in 60 plus countries, spearheaded global leadership summits in collaboration with foreign governments, and provided integral coaching for young leaders worldwide. As a sought-after public speaker, Brandon has lectured and led workshops on living systems theory, conscious leadership, climate technology, eco-psychology, and mindfulness at impact-oriented institutions and conferences around the globe. Outside the Sustainable Ocean Alliance, Brandon is a mentor for Starting Block and sits on several boards for ecologically focused projects. So thank you so much for joining us, Brandon. So we would love to start this conversation with our first question that we would like to know from you. So at Sustainable Ocean Alliance, you've been instrumental in building a global community with 7,000 plus young leaders across 186 countries. So this is a massive amount of leadership that you have built across the globe. So can you share what were the significant moments or experiences that you have had in this journey, particularly empowering young leaders in this space of ocean conservation?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate the introduction. I'll start with just some additional context about Sustainable Ocean Alliance, as it'll help illustrate the power of the community that we've built. So Sustainable Ocean Alliance is a nonprofit based in the United States with a global footprint. And we activate young people, develop and implement innovative solutions, and we mobilize a global movement to restore the health of our ocean in our lifetime. It was founded in 2014 by our CEO and founder, Daniela Fernandez, when she was just a freshman at Georgetown. And Daniela attended a UN meeting when she was a freshman. She didn't know much about the ocean. She was passionate about climate change because she had seen the inconvenient truth when she was a young girl. But really, she went to this meeting and learned some devastating statistics about the ocean, that by 2050, we would have more plastic than fish in the ocean by weight. That if we hit 2 degrees of warming, which is a certainty and something that's inevitable at this point, right? We'll lose 99% of our coral reefs. She learned stats about the importance of the ocean, that every second breath that you take comes from the ocean, that 3.1 billion people rely on the ocean for protein. this was a wake-up call for not just Daniela, but for all the other individuals that she ended up inspiring, including myself. And I had met Daniela um, shortly after she had graduated college, about 6 or 7 years ago at this point. And I was so inspired by what she had done after leaving this meeting when she was a freshman, which was to create a platform for young people that they could be part of a movement to build solutions for the ocean, not to be bystanders, not to just be researchers and talk about the problem, but actually get their hands wet, if you will, in the ocean and build the solutions that we need to restore and regenerate the ocean. Part of that has been building a global community, which was at the heart of your question. So initially, Daniela would put on summits when she was a college student, inviting students from all over the world to attend. And that trend continued, and we only scaled those efforts. So when I joined Daniela and Craig Dudenhofer, who were the first two employees of Sustainable Ocean Alliance back in, I believe it was 2018, part of my role was to grow and scale our community of young leaders. We had young leaders in about 50 countries, and our goal was to have a young leader in every coastal country, coastal city, and ultimately in every corner of the world. So I set out to grow this network in an organic way, inspired by the principles of nature and how ecosystems function, how networks and complex systems work optimally, which is in a more distributed way, right? There isn't necessarily a top-down structure that's saying, hey, you need to do everything like this. There's more of a collective intelligence that is empowering a dynamic and locally attuned mechanism, right? An organic mechanism, because it's not a machine either. So in applying, you mentioned living systems in my bio, in applying biomimicry, the design of nature, the design of natural networks, we looked at how could we mimic that, emulate that in how we designed our community. And in part of doing that, we found local champions, local young leaders that were true ocean advocates who had done incredible work at a very young age, who had their own referrals and friends in the ocean space. And we looked at them and said, well, what can we do in your region? Who do you know that can be part of this movement? How can we get them as leaders? So we've followed this replicable cycle of impact where we have leaders that we train, then train other leaders. And by no means are we telling anyone on the ground, hey, this is exactly what you want to do. We set some guardrails, which again, looking at the principles of nature, you need some structure, but we allow enough room for innovation to happen on the ground, because our young people are the experts on their communities, on what they need, on what the maritime issues and challenges are. And they have the biocultural knowledge that perhaps we don't, because we don't live there. We weren't born there. We're not accustomed to the mythology of the place. We haven't spent time in the wetlands of that region, right? So through this approach, we now have young leaders in over 180 countries. We have over 80 hubs, which are centers of gravity for ocean action, which are led by young people in their cities, at their universities. And we have 80 plus of these hubs in over 40 countries. And we continue to grow this network organically, where we're trying to really ensure that the youth are leading this work, and that SOA as a structure is federating these efforts so that there can be replicability and scale and connectivity amongst everyone. So think of SOA similar to the ocean. We are trying to be an ecosystem of ecosystems.
Wow, that's quite amazing. I think I mean, the sheer amount of leaders and the number of hubs that you just spoke about is kind of hard to imagine. Like, would like to know more about like what happens in these hubs and what are the skills and qualities of these young leaders that you train, that they are able to create those local hubs and able to create those spaces for, you know, their own regions in various coastal communities.
Absolutely. So the hubs, as I mentioned, they're youth-led, action-oriented groups, and they're organized around regional locations or university affiliations that work together, all for the purpose of promoting ocean health and sustainability. So a commonality when you look at, although there are many different projects that our hubs take on, a common thread here is that they are weaved together by Sustainable Development Goal Sustainable Development Goal 14, which is about life below water. And fun fact or not so fun fact, that this is the least funded of all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. There's about a $150 billion gap there in the funding that goal actually needs to be successful. So when we look at our hubs, we look at our hubs as really our hands, and in order to actually execute the work of SOA. You know, they're taking on projects, whether it's planting mangroves, whether it's leading beach cleanups, whether they're teaching their local businesses about circularity. They may be hosting hackathons that are inspired by biomimicry. They may be working together and doing regional events. Our hubs are really at the front lines of a lot of different political campaigns too, whether it's pushing for plastic-free campuses, or most prominently now, trying to stop extractive, exploitative deep sea mining. So we've seen our young people really educate the communities, exert bottom-up pressure on their governments so that they know civil society, led by young people who are concerned about the future of their environment, are not okay with us extracting the final pristine frontier of Earth, which is our deep sea. So our hubs are really on the ground pushing the impact forward. And we do work with our hubs. We try to, as I mentioned, we provide training, and then they provide training for other young leaders. And part of this skill building, capacity building is centered around community organizing. It's around communication skills. You can't have community without good communication. And a lot of that comes down to listening. In the same way, SOA, what we're trying to do and model is how do we listen first before speaking and acting. We want to make sure that they are leading from a facilitative standpoint. So when they're engineering these social labs, as in they're bringing together all sorts of stakeholders in their local ecosystems to try to affect larger systems change, they're able to understand diverse viewpoints. They're able to be persuasive in their communication and lead from both heart and head. A lot of that, though, comes down to two fundamental qualities, which are quite expansive. One is self-awareness, and the other is systems awareness. So self-awareness is all about how you manage your emotions, your cognition, your feelings, your thoughts, and your ability to not be so identified with everything that you may think, right? But more this witness consciousness. And to be able to then have that pause before acting, where you can see your thoughts and your proclivities and your habitual patterns, but you have the presence of mind to discern the right next action. So a lot of this is critical for leadership, especially in high-stakes situations, for young people to know their blind spots, to know their strengths, and to know how to play to those strengths and know how to minimize and transmute those blind spots into more competencies. The other is systems awareness. So systems awareness is the ability to sense into the interconnectivity of a system, to see how the parts interact, to understand how feedback loops work, grounded in systems thinking, of course. And the beauty of systems awareness and systems thinking is that you can, when you're trying to problem solve, you can understand where the right intervention is. So you look for what we call leverage points. Leverage points are areas where if you were to focus on that one thing in a system, it would have the largest impact. So by understanding the broader parts, how the parts connect, fit together, reinforce each other negatively or positively, you can then prescribe the right solution. It may not even be anything that radical, but it might be that tailored intervention you can only really see if you can see the forest from the trees.
That's quite impressive. Actually, I like the idea of looking at this as self-awareness and the systems awareness, and I think it also sounds like more like inner work, right? Like a lot of young leaders have to also have this witness consciousness and all of that kind of a mindset before they set out for work. Now, I'm assuming a lot of these young leaders across the globe must also be interacting with each other and learning a lot. So, how does that happen? And how does all of this result in collective impact for you as an alliance? Like, how do you see that happening?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, one of the key roles that Sustainable Ocean Alliance plays is to be a convener of our community. And we've done that virtually during the pandemic, and now more often we've brought people together in person. And this is through both regional and global activation. So the most recently, we gathered over 100 young people from 43 countries together in Athens, Greece, for our Ocean Youth Leadership Summit as part of the Our Ocean conference. And, since 2016, we've co-hosted these convenings alongside the US State Department, which is the first one that Daniela Fernandez, the founder and CEO of SOA, created while she was still a college student. We then went on to co-host one in Malta with the European Union. One of my first big projects was to bring 200 young people together in Bali. We worked closely with the Indonesian Ministry of Marine Affairs. Following that year, we worked in Norway, and then last year in Panama, and most recently in Athens. So during these summits, we've brought now over 600 youth, and we define youth, by the way, as anyone aged between 18 and 35. I'm approaching 35, so by the time we get there, maybe we'll raise it again. No, I'm just kidding. But over 80 countries were represented from our youth in these 6+ conferences. And this past year was really a milestone year for us because we were able to work with the Hellenic Ministry of Environment and Energy in Greece, as well as the US State Department, again, who's been a wonderful collaborator for us, to build a program that was quite compelling and ensure that our youth that were there were able to network with the 3,000 policymakers and corporate leaders and heads of international organizations that were present in Greece, that they were able to connect with each other at SOA organized dinners and partner side events so that they could really build stronger connections and enhance their regional collaborative efforts. And now after the summit's done, we have webinars where people are coming back together and having reunions. We're encouraging those who applied to go deeper into the SOA ecosystem, and whether that's applying for a microgrant. We have a wonderful microgrant program now that's funded over 350 projects, which is with over $1 million, which is really amazing. And the key to that is that we look for projects that are supporting blue carbon, circular economy, ecosystem preservation, blue food solutions, ocean data literacy. So, and for our young people that attend these conferences, we look for them to go deeper, apply for grants, start hubs, join hubs. Already out of the conference, we've had young people start hubs in places like Ethiopia and Italy and Japan and all over the world. So the hope now is beyond just doing future summits. We're going to look to, again, do the summit next year and partner with the folks that are running the UN Ocean Conference to do one in tandem there, but to do these more regionally and do them more often so that they can be in the local language. There's a lot of people attending, English is not their first language. It's hard to have a tailored conversation when it's such a global convening. So that's something that I can talk to you a little bit about later in the interview, in terms of some of our work in the global south. But it's really exciting to see how we can bring people together. And just, yeah, last thing on this is just beyond just in-person convenings, there are a number of ways people can connect. We've created an online platform called the Alliance, which is a way for young people from all over the world to connect in a private network. They can communicate directly there. They can share projects. There are jobs that they could find. There are other volunteer opportunities, grant opportunities, ways for us to really serve as this exchange place for knowledge, for wisdom, for opportunities. So with that being said, there are a number of ways for youth to connect, and that's part of our role here. Is we recognize that we're in a privileged position to be at the epicenter of this movement, and we want to make sure that we're providing that hyper connectivity so that these collaborations can truly be global.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And as a team at SOA, like what's been your memorable moments of putting all of this together with your team, and what motivates your team, and how do you do that? How do you take your team together on this? That's my first question. The second part of the question is, how do you also nurture partnerships? Because I'm sure this kind of work requires a lot of external partnerships across the world, and how do you nurture that, and how do you advance your mission with so many different stakeholders?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll start off perhaps with the first question, or the second question, and go to the first, because I'm non-linear like that sometimes. So in terms of partnerships, I mean, one of the key things that SOA looks to do is to find the grassroots NGOs on the ground and to support them and to connect them with each other. And perhaps we support them through funding, through on the ground regional collaboration, whether it's those events I was just mentioning happening on a more local regional level, whether it's having some folks that are already involved in a local NGO there join the SOA community as a mentor, join the SOA community to be mentored, depending on where they are at in their career and what their goals are. We have amassed a very large partner network, and we have certain sectors of that. We have an investor network, which is really for our startups. So we haven't really mentioned this yet, but SOA's Ecopreneur network is a really key part of the organization. So the Ecopreneur network is a program of lifetime support that's advancing the world's most ambitious ocean for-profit startups. And we support them for life. It's a lifetime guarantee of support. And really what we look to do for them is to invest in them. We can give up to $100,000 of capital as a seed investment. And we give them exclusive access to our network of founders, mentors, partners, and investors. So a lot of the partners that we make, we look to find ways in which we can then provide value for both the partner and the ecopreneur, which is an entrepreneur that is working on ecology in the ocean. The other aspect is for our young people that are working on a hub level, we do the same thing, right? So who are the enabling partners? A lot of the partners actually come through our community. So they're already working in order to actually facilitate anything on the ground. They're already working with local partners. So they bring these partners to us, and we find other ways to engage them across the board. Partnerships are very key for us. That's why we're called the Sustainable Ocean Alliance, because there's no way one organization can do this alone. We're going to need all the organizations working together. And I think what's different about SOA is really that we're paying closer attention to these smaller, locally tuned organizations that really have impact and have the buy-in of local communities, rather than these larger environmental NGOs, which I won't name, that go in to these countries and places and sometimes take credit for the work, sometimes don't have the social licensing to actually affect change. So we take a more local and I believe authentic approach to partnership building. And then you asked about SOA and perhaps our ethos of teamwork and how we work together. Did I have that correct?
That's right. That's right, man. Yeah.
Yeah. So SOA is really a wonderful team. We are quite collaborative in how we work together. We started as a in-person team in San Francisco, and then during the pandemic, we went remote, like many other organizations. Um, what I found, what I find about SOA is that the people that work here are collaborative to their bones. They are really mission oriented. They care deeply and have a personal connection to the ocean in a way that lends itself to really high performance and true care and stewardship for not just what we're doing as an organization, but also for the actual people that we're serving. So the entrepreneurs, the young leaders, there's a deep personal investment in seeing these people succeed, in having that entrepreneur raise their next round, having that young leader make sure that they get a letter of recommendation so that they can serve as the head of tourism in their country there, or write the legislation for their country on deep sea mining, which are all real stories. So there's a deep personal connection to both the ocean and then the people that are behind the solutions that we're backing. And I think that really is what drives SOA, um, is that mission orientation and deep sense of care.
Awesome. That's very inspiring. And you briefly mentioned about the plans for working in the global south, and particularly if you can share a little bit about that, particularly if there are any plans or if you're already working. You mentioned about working in Asia, but if you could expand a little bit on that, it'll be very useful for our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So within Asia, that's a critical region for us. We have hubs throughout the region. We are really looking at a number of initiatives now that are, again, this train the trainer idea, right? So we have our young people in SOA's Thailand hub who are creating their own leadership academy that other young people can go on and learn from. We've had young leaders and hubs in SOA Malaysia, in Indonesia, and throughout the region create their own webinar series in Malay and Bahasa that really speak to the local people in the local regions. And hundreds of people have attended these webinars over the years. They started out actually during the pandemic in a very organic fashion. There's been a lot of local collaboration as well. We work closely with a group called Divers Clean Action in Indonesia, who we co-hosted our Ocean Youth Leadership Summit in 2018 in Bali with. And we're always looking for ways to really grow our presence throughout the region and bring more connectivity within Southeast Asia, given how important of a place that is for ocean health, given the biodiversity, the local fauna and flora, and where a lot of the countries in Southeast Asia are in their development cycle, right? When you look at clean energy, it's absolutely critical that the 250 million, 300 million people living in Indonesia develop with solar and wind and renewable energy rather than oil and gas. When you look at climate tipping points, which of course have a real effect on ocean warming and ocean acidification and ocean health, which, for those who don't know, the ocean is really what is absorbing the excess heat brought on from climate change, and also is really at its limit there. So all of these issues are connected. And Southeast Asia is really a critical region for a lot of reasons. This coming year, there'll be a big event. Our Ocean Youth Leadership Summit will actually be in South Korea. So a lot of the focus internationally will move more towards the Asian region. As far as other global South work, I'd say our most active region is Latin America. And we have 18 hubs there. In some countries like Peru, we have a hub in each state, which is incredible. And our hubs there are thriving. They work very closely together. In fact, led by our regional representative, who is the young person who leads the community in Latin America. His name is Daniel Caceres. He has now done incredible initiatives. Not only was he one of the youngest people to run for Congress there, he organized a youth national Congress. He organized an effective bill that got a MPA for sharks passed. He has done online academies for thousands of young people in Spanish for them to learn about all sorts of leadership skills and ocean literacy skills. And as of last week, he along with the leaders of these 18 hubs came together for an event where over 100 young people attended from not just the 18 countries where we have hubs, but also 50 people from abroad were there. And they came together as part of an effort to build solutions, to have intergenerational dialogues, and to build momentum ahead of next year's UN Ocean Conference happening in Nice in France. So the hope is to continue to build the momentum in Latin America, in the global South, given that when we look at climate justice, when we look at who is really going to bear the brunt of climate change and the effects of climate change, and who has the least capacity to adapt financially and whatever else, it is the global South. And meanwhile, the global South contributed the least amount to actually causing the problem. So there is an inherent inequity there. When I've attended the COP conferences over the years, it's incredible to see the divide between the North and the South. The North is telling the South, well, you need to make sacrifices because otherwise we're all going down with the ship. And the South is like, well, this is really like we've contributed so little to this problem, and we are the least fortunate economically. We don't have the same room to sacrifice unless the global North pays us some money, which is loss and damage is a term you'll hear in the UN. So this is an ongoing debate. As it relates to the work we're doing, again, we're just looking to build enough momentum within youth-led communities that those solutions are being born out of that, right? Whether it's a young person taking on a project in Tanzania to plant mangroves and to then employ 10 and 20 other people and prevent the destruction of mangroves in the process while creating more of an economy around upcycled goods, right? Or whether it's a young person in Latin America that's looking at bioplastics and novel materials that can replace aspects that are creating micro pollution in the microplastic pollution in the ocean. How can we really ensure that this community has what it needs to be part of that solution, and also have the skills to lead others, to build community around each other, and to exert that bottom-up pressure on the current vanguard of world leaders, so that we start to see the arc of ocean policy move towards the direction of equity and of impact.
Amazing. I think I wish you and the Alliance the best to take forward a lot of this work to all parts of the global South. And I'm sitting in India, and we boast a coastline of around 7,500 kilometers. Probably it's around some 4,000 plus miles of coastline, and millions of people depending on the marine ecosystem. And my last question for the conversation is around something that you mentioned in our previous chat, like the whole of your work also emphasizes on the ethos of freeing oneself, and like also putting a lot of importance on personality development, the personal development of young leaders. And if you could share your thoughts on how this philosophy influences the approach and in the way you nurture young people to join the workforce in the larger climate action, and particularly in the ocean work.
Absolutely. I really appreciate the question here, because this is something that's often overlooked in the world of climate action. It's so biased towards action, and SOA is biased towards action in a fantastic way. We don't want anyone bystanding. We want everyone to be part of this collective effort. But there is some wisdom to understanding, as a great Indian saint Ramana Maharshi once said, that your own self-realization is the greatest service you can really render the world. And why is that, right? How does that connect to us detoxifying the ocean, us decarbonizing the ocean, to us building enlightened forms of business? Well, it all starts with our perspective, our worldview. How do we understand ourselves in this larger context, in this collective predicament that we're all in? It's very easy to see ourselves as victims, to realize that, oh, wow, all the media that I'm consuming makes me feel powerless. There are studies now where that out of Harvard, studying young people from 18 to 24, thousands of young people were interviewed. And 60% of those young people said that they suffered from acute climate anxiety. Half of that group felt that every day that they were trying to function, they were affected by worry and anxiety about climate. So to be able to be with that anxiety somatically, right, physically, to understand where some of this powerlessness, where frustration and anger lives in your body, to be able to work intelligently, skillfully with all of this external stimuli, but to remain centered in your innermost being as we still remain engaged in the outside world. That is the dynamic balance that I believe is important. I don't think we have time right now for us to find caves to go meditate in forever, like Ramana Maharshi and other great saints have done. However, there is room for all of us to pause throughout the day, pause between our actions, sit for a few minutes before we go to bed and just focus on our body breathing, and to watch our thoughts, to watch where our mental proclivities go. Where does our mind wander to? What stories are we telling about ourselves? Because if we start to understand the stories we're telling about ourselves, we can start to better understand the stories we're telling about the world. And if those stories are from a disempowered place, if those stories are too tainted by our own traumas and our own self-limitations, then we're not going to be really good, effective agents for change. So to be able to really pause, be with whatever is happening from a place of acceptance, even if it's something we can't accept externally. Can we accept whatever we're feeling and experiencing internally? And from that place, can we then act? Rather than rushing to the scene without that self-awareness, we may approach it from reactivity, which can create more polarization, more divide, and less unification, and less collective effort, right? So there's a lot of wisdom in going slow to go fast. And part of going slow at first is just that pause, that checking in with oneself. And this is a journey that we do over a lifetime, right? So it's not a matter of sitting and having a dramatic awakening of the oneness of your being. That's wonderful. And I wish that on all of us. However, it is more about us to be able to refine over time, right? When you're stretching, you're not all of a sudden going to get rid of all of the contraction and pain in your hamstrings. But if you do it a little bit every day, you might notice a little bit more flexibility and agility in how you move through the world. Same goes with our mental fitness, with our emotional, spiritual fitness. Can we treat this as an important part of our larger work on the planet? And can we see this as an enabling factor in us to be the most effective, present actors in this larger moment that we're in right now, which really is calling upon each and every one of us to get involved?
Quite an amazing response. And I was just thinking about it. Now, thank you so much, Brandon. Like, I think we will end our conversation for now at this point here. But this has been a wonderful exchange and amazing insights into your work and the philosophy behind your work and how you look at it and how you approach it and the kind of impact you are creating across the world. It's quite amazing. I'm sure all our audiences will find a lot of inspiration listening to this. Thank you so much for making time for this and uh, spending your early part of the day with us, sharing all this knowledge.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and I really appreciate the questions and the depth of conversation that we had. Just to leave your listeners with a couple calls to action in case they're more interested in getting involved in Sustainable Ocean Alliance. So first off, if anyone listening is an ecopreneur, is a aspiring entrepreneur that's trying to help the ocean in some way with a product or a service, we have a call for applications now for our 2024 cohort. It will close in early October, on October 4th. So I encourage you to apply now. We'll be reviewing the applications on a rolling basis. And for anyone who's interested in joining or starting a hub, you can contact Sustainable Ocean Alliance on LinkedIn or go to soalliance.org. There'll be a way for you to join. So whoever you are, wherever you are, if this is calling you, there is room for you in this movement. We would love to have you, and I hope to connect with all of you again in the future. Thanks so much for the interview today.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you so much.